So we're going to have a look in this video at a passage of Latin and think about the process of how to go about translating it. And the first thing to say is that when you're doing a translation, you'll very often be given some kind of a title or blurb before the Latin itself. And it's always important to read that carefully to make sure that you understand the context of the passage. So in this case, we have a title, Nero the Musician. We have a little summary. The Emperor Nero loves competing as a singer in musical contests. And then we also have the phrase which comes just before our Latin passage, which is that Nero gained some knowledge of music during the course of his early education. So that gives us a sense of what themes are going to come up in the passage. So if we look at this first phrase, so we've got Nero at the beginning. He is going to be our subject, presumably. And then notice that this next phrase is between commas. So it's almost like it's in brackets or something. So it won't give us the main verb of the sentence. That will probably come a bit later. So simulatque in Latin, or simulac, means as soon as. And then you've got this word imperium, which means power or authority or rule, something like that. And then adeptus est. If you look up adeptus in a dictionary or word list, you'll see that it is the perfect tense of the verb adipiscor, which means to obtain. And the fact that the verb adipiscor ends with that or in a dictionary tells you that it is a deponent verb. So even though this looks like a perfect passive, because you've got something that looks like you've got a perfect participle and then the present tense of sum. In fact, it's perfect active because the verb is deponent. So as soon as he obtained power, so imperium is going to be the object. And grammatically, it can't be the subject for two reasons. One is grammatical, because imperium would have to have adeptum if it was the subject, but also you need to just think about what makes sense. So it wouldn't be that power obtained something. It makes much more sense to say he obtained power. And then after the comma, you have a name, terpnum, and that name would be given to you as terpnus. So you can immediately see terpnum and kitharoidum, which means lyre player, are accusative. So the subject of this verb arcesivit must still be Nero. So Nero summoned arcesivit, and then we have our object terpnum kitharoidum, the terpnus, the lyre player. Then in the next phrase, you can see after the semicolon, we have the word quem. Now, if you have the pronoun qui, quae, quod after a colon or semicolon or full stop, beginning a new phrase, then this is what is called a connecting relative, which you can look up if you need some more information on that. But a connecting relative is essentially when Latin uses the relative pronoun that means who, where in English we would just say he or she or it. So you can treat quem as if it were eum, for example. So it means him, and it's the accusative singular form, masculine accusative singular, so it must be the object. So the question is, where is our subject? And if you look through this phrase, you will see there is no noun or pronoun in the nominative case. So if you've got no nominative noun or pronoun, your subject must be contained within the verb, audivit here. So in other words, the subject is still he, referring back to Nero. So he heard him. So quem we translate as him. He heard him. And then multos dies, right? Many days. And you notice the o there, that os ending. This is accusative. And when you have an accusative time phrase, you translate it as for a certain amount of time. So for many days. And then post canam, after dinner, post plus accusative, after dinner, ad mediam noctem. So ad means to, or all the way to, or until the mediam noctem, the middle of the night. And then optime is the adverb of optimus, so it means very well or excellently. And then cantantem, if you see that nt in the middle, that hints to you that it is a present participle. So again, you might want to look up present participles if you don't remember them very well. The verb cantare means to sing. The present participle is cantans, cantantis, and it declines like a third declension noun, like rex, for example. So cantantem is the accusative case of singing, and it's accusative because it must refer then to quem. So he heard him for many days, singing excellently after dinner up to the middle of the night. So that gives you the whole phrase there. And in each of these phrases, you'll see the key thing to look for is who is the subject, where's the verb, and is there an object, right? And if there is an object, who or what is that object? So those are always your three key ingredients in a Latin sentence: subject, object, and verb. So if we go to the next phrase, deinde, meaning then or next, Nero ipse, so Nero himself, and then you look for your main verb, which is coipit, that means he began, and as in English, the verb to begin will be followed by an infinitive, so cantare, he began to sing. Next phrase, diligenter exercendo. Now, diligenter is an adverb that means diligently. Now, exercendo, now in this word you have the nd in the middle, so it comes from exerceo, to practice or exercise, but the nd there tells you that this is a gerund or gerundive. And the o at the end tells you that it's ablative, right? So the gerund is when the verb is acting as a noun, and it means the act of doing something, so the act of practicing. So if you have the genitive, exercendi, because it's second declension, so exercendi would mean of practicing. The accusative, exercendum, would be the object, like I love practicing, or something like that, or I hate practicing, or whatever you want to say. And then here you've got the ablative, exercendo, and that means by practicing. So by practicing diligently. And then the next phrase, vocem paulatim augebat. Now, vocem is the accusative of vox, meaning a voice, so it must be the accusative case. Paulatim is an adverb that means gradually, so we need to look at our verb augebat, right? That ba tells you this is imperfect tense, and the verb augeo means to increase or strengthen. So the subject here must be he, referring to Nero, because we haven't got any other nominative noun to use. So he gradually strengthened his voice, vocem. And then if we go to the next phrase here, tandem means at last, quamquam means although, vox is a voice, eius means of him, literally. It's the genitive from is ea id. So vox eius means his voice. Ad hoc means still, like even now. And debilis means weak. And erat means was. It's the third person singular imperfect tense from sum. And we know we have a subject for erat, it is vox, which is the nominative case. So at last, although his voice was still weak. And then here, do we have a subject, a nominative noun? No, we don't. So the subject must be contained in this verb, cupiwit, he wanted. Now, if you want something in Latin, if you have this verb cupio, it could be followed by two things. One is an accusative object, like you want food, for example. But we don't really have that here. So the other option is an infinitive. You want to do something. And we do have an infinitive here, procedere. So he wanted to proceed, to go up, in skynam, onto the stage, in plus accusative. So just remember, in plus ablative means in or on, in plus accusative means into or onto. So he wanted to go out onto the stage. Then next phrase, primum. Primum could be an adjective, agreeing with a noun, but very often it just means at first. And here it wouldn't really make sense as an adjective because primum Neapolim would mean the first Naples, and that isn't really going to make sense in this context. So primum at first. Now, is there a subject here? No, there isn't. I mean, iter could be nominative, but you wouldn't normally say a journey made something or did something. You would normally say he made a journey. So it's worth just remembering that idiom, iter facio, means I make a journey. So he made a journey. And then Neapolim is the accusative of Neapolis, which is the city of Naples. And here what you need to remember is this rule that if you want to say to a city or town, you don't use the word ad, you just put the name of the town or city into the accusative case. So for example, Romam means to Rome. And that's what you have here. So first he made a journey to Naples. Now hic, this word hic haec hoc, it can mean this, or this man, or he, but it can also mean here. And you have to use the context to decide on that. In this case, it means here. So here in the theatre, and the context helps you a little bit because Naples has just been referred to, right? We've just heard about a place, so it would make sense then to talk about what happens here in Naples. So here in the theatre, now the next word is ne. And ne in Latin can do a few things, but mostly ne is followed by subjunctive. So ne plus subjunctive means in order not to do something. So a negative purpose clause. However, if you look at the verb desiit, if you look this up in a dictionary, you'll see this is just the normal perfect tense. It's the indicative, or which we could consider the normal form of the perfect tense. Desii, desiisti, desiit. It's not subjunctive. So then you've got to ask yourself, okay, if there's no subjunctive, what is ne doing here? And the answer is that it's going with quidem, because ne quidem as a unit, as a phrase, as an idiom, means not even. So if you see ne and quidem, then you've got to think not even. So not even. Now terrai and motu also go together as a sort of phrase, because terrai motus means an earthquake, literally a movement of the earth. And motu, if you look at the ending, that long u there is ablative. Right, this is fourth declension ablative, motu. With a movement, so not even with a movement of the earth. And then desiit is the verb, that means he stopped. And the subject must be he, because there's no other nominative singular noun here. So not even with the movement of the earth, with an earthquake, did he stop. And this verb is followed by an accusative, right? You stop doing something. De sino plus accusative. So did he stop cantare, singing? So not even with an earthquake did he stop singing. Ibi there, multos per dies, literally through many days or for many days. This is an accusative, time how long, which can include the word per, but doesn't have to. Multos per dies, through many days, cantavit, he sang. So there he sang for many days. And again, the subject must be he because there just isn't another singular noun that could be the subject of this singular verb. Then in the next phrase, in media etiam orchestra. Now you can see this is in plus ablative, in media, in the middle. And the other ablative that is agreeing with that is orchestra, so in the middle of the orchestra. And etiam means also or even. So he also, or even, in the middle of the orchestra, and then the main verb is kei nawit, he dined. And again, the subject must be he because there's no one else around that it could be. So he even dined in the middle of the orchestra. In terms of, how do you decide whether to translate etiam as also or as even? You sort of just use the context, really, because I think here the author, which is Suetonius, in fact, the author wants to emphasize how shocking this is. The idea of an emperor, having his dinner sort of on the stage of a theatre is kind of something shocking or horrifying. So even sort of brings that out quite nicely. But it's not wrong to say also. Now this phrase is a little bit difficult. So quinque is 5, milia is 1,000. And in Latin, that kind of number is followed by a genitive. Right? In English, we say 5,000 people, but in Latin, you say 5,000 of people. Or at least you can do. You don't have to, but you can do. So 5,000 of the juvenum pulcherrimorum. So juvenum is young men. Pulcherrimorum, pulcherrimus is the superlative of pulcher. So 5,000 of the most beautiful young men. Now, the big question here is, are these young men the subject or are they the object? So what you need to do is you need to look at the main verb, duxit, and you need to notice that it's singular. He, she, it, led. So since the young men are plural, they cannot be the subject of the verb duxit. The subject must still be he, and then the 5,000 are the object. So he led 5,000 of the most beautiful young men in theatrum, into the theatre. So again, remember, in plus ablative means in or on, but in plus accusative, which we have here, means into or onto. So he led 5,000 of the most beautiful or most handsome young men into the theatre. Now, qui here means, well, qui means who, but one thing to just remember is that qui plus subjunctive, plauderent, is a way of doing a purpose clause. It's the same as ut plauderent. So in other words, not who applauded, but who might applaud. So that was the reason he sent them, or he led them into the theatre, was so that they might applaud him, right? So this is an imperfect subjunctive, which you can recognize because an imperfect subjunctive is the infinitive, plaudere, plus the endings mst, mus, tis, nt. So he led them into the theatre, who might applaud, or to applaud, and then ipso cantante, what we've got here is an ablative pronoun, himself, and then an ablative participle, cantante. So this must be then an ablative absolute, so with himself singing, or while he himself was singing. Okay. Then, next phrase, cum. Now remember, cum in Latin is either going to be followed by an ablative noun, so then it means with, or it's going to be followed by subjunctive. And here we have no ablative noun, but we do have a subjunctive, wellet. Right? Wellet is the infinitive of the verb to want. Wallow, I want, wellet, to want. So this is the imperfect subjunctive. So when or since he wanted. And then quoque means also. Cantare means to sing. And then Romai could be genitive. It could mean of Rome. But here it makes much more sense to say in Rome. So remember, you have this locative form that means in Rome, Romai. So when he also wanted to sing in Rome. Now, populo oranti. So populo is the people, orare is to beg, and you notice with the nt here that this is a present participle, so it's the people begging, and the people here must be dative or ablative. So the question is, why is it dative or ablative? And the answer comes in the next word, promisit. So promisit means he promised. And just like in English, you promise to someone, right? You make a promise to someone. In Latin, promittere can be followed by the dative case. You promise to someone. So he promised to the people who were begging, or as they begged him, or something like that. Now, what else are you expecting after the verb to promise? You promise to somebody either a thing, right? You can promise money to someone, or more often, you promise that something will happen, right? And in Latin, if you promise that something will happen, then that's going to be an indirect statement, accusative and infinitive. So the accusative is say, the reflexive pronoun, so he promised that he, and the infinitive is askein surum esse. And this is a future infinitive, which you can recognize from the letters UR in it. So askein sum would be the PPP, but here you have the UR from the word future. The English word future has the UR there as well. So urus, ura, urum, that's a future ending. Askein surum esse. So he promised that he would climb or would go up. Now, brevi tempore, tempore is the ablative of tempus, third declension noun. So this is an ablative time phrase. So ablative time phrases mean at a certain time or within a certain time. Now it doesn't really make sense to say at a short time, but it does make sense to say within a short time. So he promised that he, within a brief time, would go up in skynam, in plus accusative, onto the stage. So that he, within a short time, would go up onto the stage. Then, next phrase, tum means then. And notice militibus, right? When you look at that, you think, okay, this comes from miles, which is a soldier, and it's ablative plural. So the question is, why is it ablative plural? Well, read on a little bit, you'll see ferentibus. Okay, that's a present participle with that nt in the middle. It's a present participle from fero, meaning I carry. So now you've got to think, okay, I've got an ablative noun and an ablative participle. And when that happens, we're talking about an ablative absolute. So with someone doing something. So then, with the soldiers carrying, and then the object is kitharam, which means his lyre. So with soldiers carrying his lyre. And then we have another ablative absolute, because you've got que meaning and, but then you've got amicis, ablative plural noun, and then comitantibus, again that nt in the middle. This is an ablative participle. So with his friends accompanying him, and you have to just imagine an object here, like eum, meaning him. In medium progressus. Okay, in medium means into the middle. Progressus is a perfect participle, right? If you look it up, you'll see that it comes from progredior, and you notice from the or at the end that progredior is deponent, so its perfect participle has an active meaning. So having proceeded or advanced in medium, into the middle. Carmen cantare coipit. Okay, Carmen is a song or a poem. Cantare means to sing, and coipit means he, she, it began. Now, grammatically, Carmen could be the subject, because it's a neuter noun. It could be nominative or accusative. But you need to think about what makes sense here. So does it make sense to say the song began to sing? No, it doesn't. So instead we have to say he began to sing a song. And we have to treat Carmen as the object. And so, yeah, so if you look up Carmen in the dictionary, you'll see Carmen, Carminis, neuter. And the fact that it's neuter means, right, for any neuter noun in Latin, the nominative and accusative are identical. So you've got to use the context to work out whether it's the subject or the object. So he began to sing a song. And the next phrase here, multas post horas. Now you can see multas and horas are going together, and post is going with them, right? Very often in time phrases, the preposition goes in the middle, and you can imagine it going beforehand, post multas horas, after many hours, right? Then idem Carmen means the same song. Etiam means also or even or still. And then audiebatur. Okay, now the BA tells you this is imperfect tense, and the tur ending tells you that it is passive. So it means was being heard. So the subject now will be Carmen, and the verb is was being heard. So after many hours, the same song was still being heard. Then deinde, then or next. Per Graeciam, through Greece. And then again we have this idiom, iter fecit, he made a journey. And in fact, you change that because it shouldn't be to Greece, it should be through Greece there. So he made a journey through Greece. Ibi means there, so we're talking about Greece now, there. Dum cantabat, so dum means while, and cantabat means he was singing, imperfect tense. So while he was singing. Now, namini that's a difficult one, that's a difficult word to remember, but if you look it up, you'll see that namini is the dative case of nemo, which means no one. So it's a very irregular word because the nominative is nemo, the accusative is naminem, then genitive is nullius, then dative namini, and then ablative nullo. So it's a bit strange, so it's worth looking up and making a note of. But anyway, here it's dative case. And why is it dative case? Well, the answer comes in the next word, permisit. Because permittere means to permit or allow. And that is often followed by dative and then infinitive, because you allow to somebody to do something. So, the subject must be he, because we've got no nominative noun here. So he allowed to no one, and then the infinitive is exire, to go out. And then a teatro means out of the theatre. So he allowed no one to go out of the theatre. Then next phrase, itaque means and so. And then feminae quaedam means certain women. Now here, feminae, you've got to think, well, what form is feminae? Could be genitive or dative singular. Could be nominative or vocative plural. So how do you know? Well, have a look at the main verb, which is dicuntur, and you'll see with that ntur ending, that is a third person plural ending, right? So therefore, the feminae must be the subject, the women, because otherwise, where are we going to get a plural noun to be the subject of dicuntur? Right? And it can't be someone from the previous phrase, because the previous phrase was all about Nero, and Nero is not plural. So the women are going to have to be the subject. So, and so, certain women, then dicuntur is present passive, are said, And if you say that somebody is said, then that's normally followed by an infinitive, right? Is said to do something, and the infinitive is e nixai esse. And this comes from a deponent verb, e nitor, which is to give birth. And here you've got the perfect participle, e nixus, or here feminine plural, e nixai plus esse. This is the perfect infinitive. Right, like locutus esse, to have spoken, or secutus esse, to have followed. So certain women are said to have given birth in teatro, in the theatre. And then next phrase, ipse. Now this brings us back to Nero, because ipse is masculine singular, he himself. And then the main verb is accepit, received or accepted. And then semper means always, so he himself always accepted or received. And then the object is going to be summum premium, which means the highest reward or the top prize or something like that.